Welcome back once again. It is your old boy Pilk, and of course, we are going to be covering episode 18 when it airs on Friday. But of course, Dragon Ball Daima. But there's a couple of big questions that are surrounding this whole thing, and obviously, knowing that Goma's new powers are really going to be something massive that our peers are going to have. I mean, what do we have in store right now? We have Tamagami 1 that is now in the fight. We have Majin Do, who already beat Tamagami 1 by a slim margin, admittedly. But more importantly, we have Goku and Vegeta, and all them, as well as many more, are simultaneously fighting Goma. And Goma doesn't even seem to be breaking a sweat with the third eye now. And we talked this morning about the possibility of there being Super Saiyan 4 coming up in this next episode. But if you go back to the first few episodes, you remember they introduced a new form of fusion. Now, we haven't seen it on screen yet, and that leads me to a couple of questions about that. But to more talk about this, essentially, if you remember back to DBZ specifically, we had two forms of fusion that were introduced at that point in time. We had the metamor and finger fusion, i.e., what Gogeta and Gotenks use, and then we have the patara fusion, which Vegito uses, and that's kind of introduced with these earrings of the Kais. If you really remember back, you know that the Elder Kais actually fused with these with some random witch, which is why he kind of looks old. In fact, it really kind of hasn't been covered. His whole thing hasn't been covered since, but nevertheless, that essentially are the two forms of fusion we have. Well, when we open up the episode or open up the series, they introduced basically we don't have senzu beans now. We have recovery bugs, and they're like, we have a bug for everything. There's a fusion bug. So we know that at some point in time, those fusion bugs are going to come into play. In fact, kind of going back to our discussion this morning, we know that Vegeta's already basically become a cause. He didn't want to use the bugs at first. He didn't want to eat bugs, which, I mean, who can blame him? Let's be fair. But now he's at a state where he is totally accustomed to the recovery bug. He's like, the recovery bug, gimme, and then get back into the fight, right? So, there's much to kind of take away from that. Also, we never saw Goku buy the fusion bugs, but we also never saw Goku buy the recovery bugs, and then he's got a satchel full of bugs. Now, he has unfortunately lost that satchel, and I kind of feel like that is going to be a big plot point in this coming episode. So if I'm totally honest with you guys, I'm not certain that the fusion is going to happen in episode 18. In fact, we've got, I think, several episodes still remaining of the series, or at least this season of the series. So we've got to see what's going to happen with all of this. Now, there's two main points here that I kind of want to bring up. And number one, we already know the fusion is going to happen. There's no reason that they would introduce it and then, not bring it into play. So number one, when this fusion happens, is it going to be Gogeta or Vegito? Because there's basically two camps here, right? Now, let's kind of break this down a little more and talk about how these two different fusions work and how we can surmise this. So number one, whenever you have Gogeta here, you always have this kind of vest. And that's one of those things that's really just a product of that metamor and fusion technique, the fusion dance thing that Goku basically taught to Vegeta, Gotenks, and all them. The thing that makes Gogeta, Gogeta. Now, arguably, he really wouldn't be Gogeta without the vest, but what really makes Gogeta Gogeta is the fact that it does seem to be Goku, at least, I mean, especially in the facial structure. Like, if you look at that face, that is way more Goku, where Vegito's way more Vegeta. Now, it is a fusion of them, but it always does seem like one personality is kind of more dominant over the other. And that's kind of where these two really tend to differ, is that Goku's a little more dominant here in the Gogeta form, and Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta really kind of embodied that because, well, actually, the funny part is, if you really want to break it down, movie Goku was always way more ruthless than series Goku. I mean, go back and watch the movies. Goku unalived a bunch of dudes without even thinking about it. But in the series, Goku's always yeah, but I could fight him later, and that would be fun, so we're just going to let that happen. Or in the U.S. dub version, they always made him out to be a little more heroic, but in the Japanese version, he's just like, but that dude's going to be fun to fight with and train against later, so we're just going to let him live, right? When you got to GT, the Gogeta version, which, by the way, absolutely love, one of my top favorite fusions, one of my top favorite forms in general, and I love the fact they kind of varied it up a bit with, the red hair and all that. But that Gogeta form was just a bit too silly, and he really didn't take the fight seriously. Now, that kind of... it tracks for, like, Kid Goku, and you have to remember that Kid Goku was very naive. Kid Goku, we're talking Dragon Ball era, very naive, didn't take a lot of his situations as seriously as he should have. When he became an adult, he definitely did, and that was a big improvement on his character. But as a kid, he really didn't take too many situations seriously. So I think that's what they were kind of going for there. But you got to remember, this was an adult Goku's mind in a kid Goku's body, very similar to what we have now. So it's possible we could see a form of Gogeta. In fact, we talked this morning about the possibility of there being a Super Saiyan 4. If you want the full breakdown on that, go check that out. I'm not going to go back too much into that, but this morning we dropped a video on that. So we could even see a resurgence of the Super Saiyan 4 form as Gogeta. In fact, there's a possibility that both Gogeta and Goku could go Super Saiyan 4 and then use a fusion bug and then fuse into Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. Completely plausible. Now, we got to talk about Vegito. So whenever Vegito forms, he forms via the earrings. And it's just because Vegeta at that stage is basically the dominant mindset, I guess you could say, the dominant mentality. And he's always more precise, more calculating, but also more cocky. And as being Vegeta, he makes mistakes from time to time. We really did see that with Super Vegito versus Buhan, where he then got absorbed because he was basically goofing around. Now, people have argued that, yeah, maybe he did it on purpose. It didn't seem that way for most of us that originally watched it. I don't know what the dub said about it, because I'll be completely honest with you guys. I never watched the dub version of the Buu Saga. I honestly only watched the Japanese version. So I can only bring you what I know about the Japanese version, unfortunately. That's just the version that I had, that I was able to obtain by the time I was getting into the later portions of Dragon Ball. But long story short, when Dragon Ball went into like its 14th whatever rerun during the Frieza saga, I said, forget this. And I was able to go rent some VHS tapes, and eventually when we got broadband, get online and get the whole series long before it was available on TV. So that's just how I did. But nevertheless, I'm very lucky in that regard that we had somebody locally that had all the tapes. But nevertheless, when it comes to Vegito specifically, Vegito is not perfect by any stretch. Neither one of these guys really are, and that's kind of the point. They each have their different character flaws. But it wouldn't make much sense for there to be a Vegito without these Patara earrings, or would it? Now, let me pose a question to you guys, and this is where it's going to kind of get weird, because we've already seen Gogeta. We've already seen Vegito. We've been there, done that. Is it possible there's maybe a third fusion that is a little more evenly spaced between the two? Maybe he shares like the best traits of Goku and the best traits of Vegeta. And what would you call that fusion? Like, what would that be named? Because you got to remember, Gogeta is Goku and Vegeta. And the reason it's that way is because Goku is the dominant personality. Vegito is because it's Vegeta and Kakarot. Remember, in Japanese, he's not just Kakarot, he's Kakarot. So, Vegito is Vegeta and Kakarot. Is it possible, because we have seen Vegeta basically admittedly call him Goku from time to time. Even in Super, I think he mostly still called him Kakarot, but, it's a weird one. Is there a way they could make a third version that's a little like somewhere halfway between these two that then, and what would you name that fusion? Or let me kind of throw this option out there for you guys. And this is where I want you guys to be, react with me in the comments. I want to know, like, what would you call that fusion and what would it kind of look like? Now, other option here, they have said very specifically that this is, I don't want to call it nostalgia bait, but it kind of is. It is very much GT nostalgia bait. Some of the, I think it was one of the directors of the show actually came out and admitted this really within the last 24 hours. And because of that, it 100% could be Gogeta, just, without the vest, some other form of Gogeta. And since it's pretty surmisable that Super Saiyan 4 is coming, once again, go watch that video earlier today for my whole take on that. If that's the case, then it's very likely we just see a resurgence of Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. But let me pose a third option on you here. And this third option is, we have never canonically seen Super Saiyan 4 Vegito. And if you go back to, like, Super especially, where they're really taking things that are from, the not canon, that are favorite versions of something. Case in point, we're looking at Broly. Broly was never canonically in the Dragon Ball Z universe, but in Super, they brought him in the movies and they made him canonical. There's a lot of talk about there potentially being a Cooler one day. And in fact, in the dub, I do know that Cooler was mentioned in the dub. So there's a possibility they might bring him into the fold one day. Is it possible that they take this form, which was kind of exclusive to, like, Heroes and other, like, what if media like that, we're looking at Dokkan and things like that, and brought him into the arguable canon of Dragon Ball, and we've already seen Vegito as the primary form in the Dragon Ball televised media, not, because Gogeta's always been in the films with the exception of GT, but GT is obviously written out at this point. We're going, DBZ, Daima, back to, like, the last couple episodes of DBZ, to Battle of Gods, to Super is kind of the going canon now. GT's kind of off in the distance. GT's its own parallel universe weird thing going on out there. So I guess the question becomes, which fusion would you want to see? Which fusion do you think it is? And if it's that third fusion option, what would you call it? And what would it look like? Now, ignore Super Saiyan 4 for a minute, but I do honestly, in my heart of hearts, believe that both are at some point going to make an appearance. So that's kind of why I'm here right now. I kind of feel like episode 18, probably Super Saiyan 4. Maybe 19 or 20, we'll likely see. I don't remember how many episodes they're slanted to be, but most likely, since 12 episodes is a season this day and age, I would assume 23, 24 episodes, and we'll probably be through with it at that point. But, or at least through this arc. But at this juncture, when it comes to the rest of this particular story, I could completely see Super Saiyan 4 Fusion in the next 2 to 3 episodes. Let me know what you guys think, though, in the comments down below. And that's where I want the interaction to be, because I really want to know your opinions on this. My personal opinion, I'm kind of hoping it's Super Saiyan 4 Vegito. Because that would be awesome. That would be the great. I mean, we've seen Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. We have never seen this outside of the what if stories. So that's kind of my personal take. I think it's going to be Super Saiyan 4 Vegito. But it could definitely be a third option that's not even on the table yet. And personally, I almost want that more, but I just can't really fathom what that would look like. So, use your imagination. You sound off, and I'll see you guys again real soon.